How's it? Welcome to a new episode of the West Coast Heat Check. It's a bit of a special episode with the NBA trade deadline happening today. We have a bunch of trades to talk about. That's all we're really going to talk about in this episode of the West Coast Heat Check. The host, Nick Rice, is unavailable this week, so he'll be coming back next week, along with Kevin Dana. So originally planned, our show was it was going to be action packed with trade deadline, another top five face off, but we're going to hold off all of that for next week. So tune in, like this video if you're enjoying it, and subscribe to our channel for more videos from us, from the Big Skinny. Steve Hughes alongside me is, as always, is the Deits, Robert Deiters. And let's get right into it. Let's talk about the biggest trade that happened on the trade deadline day. It was the Magic trading away Nikola Vucevic to the Chicago Bulls. Alongside that, along in that trade, it's Al-Farouq Aminu going to Chicago for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and then 2 first-round picks. That package is going to Orlando. Robert, this is a very big trade. This is pretty much the sign that the Magic they're not really they're not accepting the roster that they have at the moment prior to all these trades. It's now it's back to rebuilding mode for Orlando.
And the Big Skinny, you have to realize this team went 8th seed 2 years in a row. I think only won 1 game and I think got swept. Just not great playoff runs. And they try to put some talent together, it's just not working out. And a lot of injuries do happen with the Orlando Magic. I mean, we saw Markelle Fultz go down. I'm blanking on a name here, but I will get back to. I know
Jonathan Isaac, I think he tore his
ACL. Yeah, Jonathan Isaac is also out as well. He was out in the playoffs, comes back in the regular season, also gets hurt again. So Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz have just not been there for those pieces for the Orlando Magic. But I like that the Magic has finally decided to move on, give Vucevic somewhat of a contender. I mean, now if you think about this, helps Lauri Markkanen and helps Zach LaVine. I think with you bring in a guy that has been the team leader in like points per game, rebounds, field goal percentage, 3-point field goal percentage. Like the man could do everything. He's the center. He can get the job done, and he's really gonna be that workhorse for Zach LaVine. And Zach LaVine, he's done everything. He's been the guy. He's been the leader. He's had to go off almost every night. Well, now you got a guy named Vucevic who is really going to help out. But Magic also get kind of a win here. They get Wendell Carter Jr., a young center that is going to develop with Orlando, and I think him and Markelle Fultz are going to work out just fine down there, especially for next year. And Vucevic is under contract next season, so it's interesting to see what the Bulls might do in this offseason as well. Maybe they bring in another superstar.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's really interesting to see with the Bulls going all in for Nikola Vucevic. Right now, they're 19-24, which puts them as the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. Which, if the season were to end today, they would be the last team in for that play-in tournament. I mean, for me, it's really interesting that. I mean, I think Orlando got a pretty solid package in return for Vucevic and Al-Farouq Aminu. I mean, like you mentioned, Wendell Carter Jr. could be possibly a standout in terms of, I wouldn't say building a franchise around him, but he could be a key piece down the line. You pay him well, like, hey, this is going to be a project for the next 2 or 3 years, but we're going to pay you handsomely. And we want you to be one of the key pieces moving forward so that we can rebuild this franchise. And it's going to be interesting to see if he buys in or not. But I think that's the Orlando mindset at the moment for him. For Otto Porter Jr., there's a lot of money involved in his contract. And I really don't see, and as a veteran, I kind of see him I can see like a buyout pretty soon for Otto Porter Jr. and him possibly going to a playoff contender, thinking of as like a backup for Chris Middleton in Milwaukee, a backup to LeBron in LA, like on a veterans minimum, going a little ring chasing, but still. And then the two first round picks, which is just a sign that any team is looking to rebuild, to look into the future rather than focus on the present. One last thing I want to talk about. So, Robert, like the Bulls, they're on the fringe, as I mentioned, of making the play-in tournament. In the Eastern Conference, you have teams like the Raptors. We'll talk about a little later on in the show. That was active in the trade market. You also have the Pacers and the Celtics. Those four teams. The difference between the Celtics at the 8th seed and the Raptors, the 11th seed, or out of the play-in tournament, is just 3 games. What type of impact does this Vucevic trade put on the Bulls in terms of maybe solidifying a spot into that play-in tournament?
It adds another veteran. It adds someone that has been a 2-time All-Star, and Zach LaVine just got his first all-time star nod. So you're going to see 2 All-Star teammates being I think, a fantastic duo down in Chicago. I think this is what they needed. Chicago has been a very irrelevant team, and Zach LaVine has made them the relevant. Well, Vucevic is going to give him that credibility, and it's going to help him down low, and also he can shoot threes. So the way I look at it is I think the Bulls got a big win. Vucevic is under contract for another year. Him and Zach LaVine can develop chemistry this season. I see them. Honestly, I think they're gonna, fight in that. I think they're gonna be that maybe 7th, 8th seed team now, especially with that duo in there. I'm liking what I can. I love what I see out of the Bulls, and hopefully they, run this 7 to 10 tournament. We're gonna see what happens. I don't think they're gonna be 1 through 6 at all, but I think Vucevic is going to help that record just a little bit. I mean, we saw what the Eastern Conference looks like. Like the Hornets are 4th seed right now. That's wild. I mean, the Bulls could jump up. You never know. Let's see what Vucevic and Zach LaVine do in the next few games and see what happens.
In a normal episode, we will definitely be talking about the LaMelo Ball injury and how that's going to affect the Hornets moving forward. But we'll touch on that more next week, especially as we're starting to learn more about the possibility that LaMelo could return at some point in the regular season. Let's move on to the next Orlando Magic trade. This time, it's a local guy for Robert and I, as natives of the San Francisco Bay Area. Archbishop Mitty alumni Aaron Gordon has been traded to the Denver Nuggets. Him and Gary Clark will be going to the Mile High City, while the Magic will be getting a return Gary Harris, rookie RJ Hampton, and a 2025 protected first-round pick. I'll make a quick point first before I hand it off to the Deits. I think the Nuggets struck gold with this trade to get Aaron Gordon. I mean, Jeremy Grant was a guy that was really, really key to that playoff run that the Nuggets had to go to the Western Conference Finals. And with him leaving, there's definitely been a big hole with the Nuggets. And I think Aaron Gordon fills that in a lot of great ways. And the Nuggets, they also need to work on the fact that the games that end up really, really tight, they're the games that are decided by 5 or fewer points this season. They're 6-7 this year after going 12-9 last year. So it's literally all about the depth on that bench if there are guys who are fouling out or guys who are tired. Aaron Gordon is a guy who can step up to the plate and really be a benefit for the Nuggets for the remainder of this season and into the playoffs. And I just think of it as just a big dub for the Nuggets. And for the Magic, I mean, as I mentioned for Wendell Carter, the same will go for RJ Hampton. He's a rookie. Hey man, can you buy into our process in terms of rebuilding our franchise? And for RJ Hampton, he's under contract for another like 2 or 3 years since he's a rookie. But for Gary Harris as a veteran, he could be another guy that might not be sticking around for a whole lot longer for the Orlando Magic. But Robert, I want your 2 cents of the local guy Aaron Gordon going to Denver.
Steven, as a man that was a Magic's fan last season, man that loves Aaron Gordon as much as I do, it was sad to see him go. You never want to see AG leave that Orlando Magic vibe. I thought he was going to embody that magic his entire time, but it had to come to an end. Just had to go. You saw Vucevic go. We saw Aaron Gordon go and Evan Fournier go. I'm happy for him. He's on a, competitive team, like a team that could make the playoffs and win a couple more games than get eliminated in one series. I mean, that's what you want to help out with Aaron Gordon. He just wants to be happy and be on a team that's going to be a playoff competitor. Well, AG got what he wanted. And it also, I think, complements with the Michael Porter Jr. I think those two are just going to be really solid hand to hand together. And we've been seeing Michael Porter Jr. start more games this season. He started 27 in total this season, and he keeps growing. Gary Harris hasn't even played 20 games this season. So this was a huge win for Denver. I mean, and they do have to send a first round pick to the Magic, but I think the Magic won that part of it. At least they get a first round pick, giving up AG and Gary Clark. But Aaron Gordon definitely deserved a lot better than the Orlando Magic. I mean, the man gets screwed over in dunk contest. Maybe a different team. Maybe he'll join it again and see what happens. Maybe a different team will give him a whole different culture, a new reality, and I think this makes Denver a lot stronger on top of it. And I know Aaron Gordon's not going to be a free agent after this season, so they have him locked down for a while. And it's going to help out Jokic, who's been doing a lot. I mean, Steven, we talked about possibly an MVP candidate here, and he needs the help he can get. So with having Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, that's going to be a solid four right there. And we're going to see Aaron Gordon in that starting lineup. I'm very excited to see what he could do. I think he's going to make a very big impact quickly.
Denver Nuggets right now, they are the 5 seed in the Western Conference with a 26-18 record. They're essentially tied with the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, and you said it yourself. I think he could be a solid starter along with Nikola Jokic. Pardon me. And I think that with how tight the Western Conference is, I mean, the difference between the 5 seed where the Nuggets are at and the 10 and the 9 seed is only 3.5 games. And we're talking about the second half of the season in the NBA is very long, a lot longer than the first half. So it's all about depth, proper rotations between players, and just getting ready for that for the playoffs. And I think the Nuggets are doing an exceptional job with this. But the thing is, with what they gave up, like RJ Hampton in the first round pick in 2025, it's going to be interesting to see if Denver at the end of this season would actually be interested in signing Aaron Gordon to an extension. I mean, right now you have Jokic and Jamal Murray on extension, on like max contracts. And then also Michael Porter Jr., someone you just mentioned, who's been playing very well. He's due for a big extension as well that would kick in 2 years from now. So Denver, financially speaking, they need to think of like tactically in this situation, because with Aaron Gordon, yes, you're going to save a little bit of money because Gary Harris, I guess he had like incentives that went up to 20 million, and Aaron Gordon's base salary for this season is just 16.5 million. So they save a few $1,000,000. But when it comes to long-term extensions, that's going to be interesting to see if Denver would actually, if they re-sign Aaron Gordon, what happens to Michael Porter? If they let go of Aaron Gordon, then you have to believe that Michael Porter is getting the extension.
And it's going to, show competition for Michael Porter. Well, it's fascinating to see what competition we're going to see with Denver, who's really going to stick around after this season. And Michael Porter Jr. could be a trade piece. I've been hearing a lot of rumors that he could be a young trade piece, maybe get the picks or, get another superstar in there and help out Jokic a little bit. He could be a solid trade piece right now. I just want to see how they both work together on the court, especially with Jokic and Jamal Murray as well. So,
yeah, there's, I mean, in the proposed trades, and we'll get to Kyle Lowry not getting traded later on in the show, but for teams like for Philadelphia who wanted to get Kyle Lowry or Miami, they needed to give up a vital piece. And for Philly, it would have been Danny Green. And for Miami, it would have been another young guy, like you mentioned, Michael Porter Jr. as a young trade piece. I think Tyler Hero would have been kind of like a trade changing, addition into anything that would possibly land Kyle Lowry somewhere else than Toronto. So just really interesting stuff. And again, we'll get to Lowry later on, but I completely agree. Just as a young trade piece, they're on rookie contracts right now, so you can use them as ways to get these veteran pieces that make a short-term impact on your season and possibly on your playoff hopes. And then the final big Orlando trade that happened was between Orlando and the Boston Celtics. We're talking about Evan Fournier getting traded to Boston for 2 second-round picks. I think this is good in some ways, bad in some other ways. If for Boston, I think that the issue for Boston right now is their defense. Their defense is they're getting just sliced and diced by literally everybody. And Evan Fournier doesn't really provide much of a defensive upgrade. He's more of a defensive liability for the Celtics now. But in terms of offensive production, he's a guy that can fill in to the role that Gordon Hayward has left void for quite some time. Robert, what are your thoughts on this trade? Evan Fournier to Boston.
You talk about how their defense hasn't been solid. Well, I agree with you on that. There's also a reason why they brought in Evan Fournier. They're bringing in a kind of more of a veteran presence that they really need. Yeah, Kemba Walker possibly was going to be that guy, and Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague. Well, that didn't really help. It's not showing right now because Kemba Walker looked solid last season. This year, he just looks kind of off and doesn't look like the same Kemba Walker we were, expecting for the Boston Celtics. Evan Fournier basically averages 20 points a game with the Orlando Magic. And I think he's going to bring more of, I think he's going to lay off the pressure of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as well. I just think they rely on them way too much. And then when Kemba Walker has to force shots up, it just doesn't go very well. So I think this is a win for them. 2 second-round picks. I don't know how much I like that, but hey, sometimes second-round picks do work out. I'm just not the biggest fan of. I don't know. They got 2 second-round picks. It doesn't sound all amazing. So I think the Boston Celtics won this trade.
I know it doesn't, but I mean, with Evan Fournier, he was on the final year of his contract. I mean, I think for Orlando, I think this is kind of a dub just to get 2 first-round picks out of a guy who his contract's going to expire in June or July, depending on when the Celtics get eliminated for the playoffs. I don't see them as any type of like Eastern Conference contender to possibly go to the finals. There's just way too many glaring issues that they have at the moment. So I think this is kind of I think this is a dub for the Magic. I mean, what would you rather do if you're the Magic? Would you like to let Fournier go for free or get a couple second-round picks out of it? I mean, I would take the second-round picks. I know the odds of that second-round pick being impactful are very low, but you never know. You can possibly get a Draymond Green out of the second round like the Warriors did some few years ago. So, and it also creates a bunch of caps. It creates cap space. You don't have to worry about, hey, like we could possibly re-sign Fournier. Okay, he's gone. We got what we got from Boston. So, I think at the end of the day, I think this is a win for both teams. For Boston, offensively speaking, they're getting a guy who's having a career year shooting the ball from downtown, which I mean that's obviously become the vocal point for the NBA nowadays is the ability to shoot the 3-point ball at an efficient level. So, anything else you have to say, Robert, involving this trade?
Evan Fournier is just going to add more of a veteran presence. I think, 3-pointers wise, he's going to be that guy. They're going to throw it out to him, and hopefully he gets that 3-point shot. But I don't see him staying with Boston after this season, I think you're right. They got something out of it. That's what matters. At the end of the day, it's better than nothing, and it's better than a buyout at this point because, Steven, we've been seeing buyouts. We've been seeing possible like Andre Drummond, LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMarcus Cousins. Like, no one wants them, so they have to get bought out, and then teams will sign them for a lot cheaper and not have to pay that contract. So kudos to the Boston Celtics and the Magic. I give the Magic the dub on this one because they could definitely saved a lot of cap room too. On top of it, they saved a lot of cap room, to be honest, in these 3 trades alone. So
Yeah, and before we go to a bit of a break, I mean, let's talk about everything that the Magic have gotten from these trades. So you're talking about 3 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and I mean Wendell Carter Jr., which that could be pretty big for this organization. Otto Porter Jr., I don't really see him in the long-term plans. Gary Harris, don't see him in the long-term plans. RJ Hampton, I do. So I think with the Magic indicating that this is the beginning of their new rebuild, I think they're off to a kind of a solid start. I know the first round pick they gained from Denver is not going to be till 2025, so 4 years from now. But still, I mean, they're kind of loading things up to make a push for the future. I think this isn't a bad idea with how they're doing this season and with all the injuries that been accumulating, like we mentioned with Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac.
yeah, injuries have really killed the Magic, but I get when you look at what they got out of it, 2 first-round picks, another first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks. Hey, that's 5 picks right there in 3 trades. It can't get better than that. And if you're rebuilding, this is what you want. You want picks so you could get possible superstars to get into Orlando and hopefully revamp this team. Because for some reason they were an 8 seed team last year, and they go to 15-29 record. Yikes! Like, you thought this experiment would work well, but they also have Cole Anthony. I forgot about. They got a young Cole Anthony too. They're going to develop with Markelle Fultz at that point guard position. So I think Orlando, I think they're rebuilding. It's going to be a long time before we see Orlando compete in a while, but 5 picks in total. Plus you get Wendell Carter Jr. to help out, and he's only 21. Gary Harris, I don't know if he'll really stick around, to be completely fair. And then you get rookie RJ Hampton, and probably you're going to buy out Otto Porter Jr. at this point. I think Magic made a solid win on this. They gave up their best. They gave up like their top 3 best scorers on that team. So it's sad to see them go, but a new era of Orlando is going to begin with a lot of young stars.
Like Robert said, Orlando Magic 15-29, second to last in the Eastern Conference. I mean, mathematically speaking, if they were to make a run with these new players that they traded for, they could mathematically, not realistically, but mathematically speaking, they could actually still make the play-in tournament. They're only 4.5 games back of the Chicago Bulls at that 10 seed that we mentioned earlier. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the bigger trades that happened that did not involve the Orlando Magic, like Oladipo, JJ Redick, and Rajon Rondo on the move. This is the West Coast Heat Check on YouTube. Again, if you enjoy this video, give us the like. If you enjoy more and want to get more notifications for our videos, please feel free to subscribe. And we're back for some more West Coast Heat Check. Before we continue with our show, shout out to James Spray for the awesome logo for the West Coast Heat Check, and also to Manny Argueta, the track for our intro and our ending tracks. I mean, shout out to him. They're bangers. They're sick. And we really appreciate the both of them for their contributions to the channel. And also, just a quick heads up, a guest from episode 3 of the West Coast Heat Check, Kevin Dana, the play-by-play announcer for the G League Santa Cruz Warriors, he will be back as the guest next week. So tune in for that. That'll be again a Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific time release for episode 10, really, of the West Coast Heat Check. This is just the trade deadline special that we're having, especially since the host isn't here. Nick Rice, a busy student as he always is, could not make it tonight. But we move on to Victor Oladipo. We've talked about him in a few episodes. The first one when he rejected the contract extension that Houston was willing to give him. Then we also talked to him as a definite trade candidate come the trade deadline, and now we're here. We're here today, and Victor Oladipo is now a member of the Miami Heat. Victor Oladipo will go to Miami. In exchange, Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a 2022 first-round swap rights will be heading to Houston. Essentially, just another team who is just rebuilding at this point, and they really started doing that once James Harden was traded away. But they were hoping that Victor Oladipo would stick around and possibly be a piece moving forward into the future. But I mean, it's really like an end of an era for Houston, and it's unfortunate that a team with a lot of success in their history will be in the same realm of the Orlando Magic as a rebuilding team over the next couple of years.
Victor Oladipo, it's crazy to think that when he rejected the Rockets offer, I didn't think he was going to get traded at this deadline, but Victor Oladipo ended up going to a team that went to the finals last year, the Miami Heat, and they didn't have to give up Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, or Kendrick Nunn. They got to keep all those pieces. They had to just give up Kelly Olynyk. I mean, come on. Like, that's a steal in its own for the Miami Heat. Shout out to them. They're getting a guy that, yeah, he's had a rough injury-prone career, but when he's healthy, he's on. I mean, we saw Oladipo basically for 20 games with the Houston Rockets, and he averaged 20 points a game. And the only other guy to match that is Bam Adebayo for the Miami Heat right now. And their leading scorer being Jimmy Butler with 21 points. So they're adding another big-time scorer. They're adding a guy who's very athletic. And I think this is the push they need for them to get back in the finals run. And the Eastern Conference is weird right now. I mean, I think, as I said, I still believe Miami Heat is that 4th, 5th seed type of team. I don't think it'll be that 1 through 3. But I think with Oladipo in the mix for them now, and they still have Hero and Duncan Robinson, yeah, I believe this team could be a 4th seed team easily. And they dominate this season. Can they compete against Milwaukee, Philly and all that? I think they can. I think they have a great shot of taking down those type of teams. It's just going to be the matter of, is Oladipo going to fit in? Is he going to get going early? They got to get that chemistry going now and have those starters get lots of minutes together before that playoff run. So Miami Heat did a great job getting Victor Oladipo in this trade and still keeping key pieces for a solid playoff run and potentially for the Miami Heat to go back to the finals. Potentially go back to back. Why not?
Yeah, no, and the only issue that I have with Victor Oladipo is that with the injuries, with COVID and all that, in the last 14 months he's only played like 48 games. He's played 20 so far this year, and he's been playing pretty well. But you just have to worry. I mean, this guy over the last few years has been consistently injured. But I think that I think like you said, you didn't have to get rid of Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, the key guys that you want to hold on to. I think if we're talking about a Kyle Lowry trade involving Toronto and Miami, I think that's a completely different story. I think Tyler Hero needs to be given up. But for Victor Oladipo, I mean, it's how much are you willing to risk on a guy that's injured quite often, for the possibility that if he stays healthy and is consistent like he has been, in years past. I mean, this is a huge pickup as a compliment for Jimmy Butler in the backcourt for Miami. But that's just the big glaring concern I have is just the injury concerns with quadriceps tendon rupture that set him out for more than a year. And then for Houston, I mean, with Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley, you're talking about two guys who, they can function as guys who, are they have expiring contracts at the end of the year. So it's just they're going to play out the rest of the season. But it's going to be curious to see if either Bradley or Olynyk want to stay put in Houston. I think one of them would get a decent amount of money to stay in Houston and to kind of be a part of this rebuild. I could see Olynyk staying. I could see Avery Bradley going back to more of like a playoff contender. I wouldn't say a game bought out during this season, but probably going somewhere on a relatively cheap deal in the offseason. So for the Rockets, I mean, they needed to get rid of Victor Oladipo for something. It's similar situation with Orlando giving away Fournier to the to the Celtics. Right? You need to get something in return. Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, you can see, hey, which one deserves to get a nice contract from us to stick around. And it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I think right now with Miami, they are the 7th seed. They're 22 and 23 right now. But for the 4 seed and the 9 seed are only separated by a game and a half right now. So it's really anybody's ball game in the Eastern Conference. So I think with Victor Oladipo, like I said, if he is healthy and just producing well, I think this is a huge pickup for Miami, and I think they solidify at least a top 5 seed in the Western, and not the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference.
And the Hornets right now are the 4th seed, Steven. And I think that's gonna go down. I mean, you saw LaMelo Ball; he is out for the rest of the year. That was basically the guy that they were going to in Scary Terry. But yeah, I think Miami Heat are gonna claim that 4th seed title and come back up on where they were, because they were a 4th seed for a while and then fell back down and go back. I love this like 4 through 8 like 4 through 9 roller coaster ride. Like we just see a different team every week. It's like, oh, you're 4th seed this week, you're gonna be 5th seed this weekend, you're gonna be 6th, 7th, 8th. It's just unbelievable. But I think Miami Heat, they're gonna be that top 4 team. They're gonna be in that discussion as being one of the top Eastern Conference teams. Yeah, it's gonna take a while maybe for chemistry, but they've also had COVID issues. They haven't had a pretty season, to be completely honest with you, Steven. I mean, it's a weird season in itself. Like, players were not out because of COVID ever until now. So even teams just adjusting to that. We didn't see Bam Adebayo for a while. We had to see Jimmy Butler was out for a while. We had to see like a young Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn. We had to see a young core try to lead this team, and they're not doing bad. I mean, yeah, it's the Eastern Conference. People call it a joke sometimes, but it's not. Like when teams don't have their star guys and they have young guys like that, keeping them within 500, I think that's pretty impressive on its own. And it shows that Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, none are meant to be there, especially with veterans like Andre Iguodala, and they recently got Trevor Ariza. So Miami Heat got got another star in Victor Oladipo. They got a guy who can score and get to the basket. They still have Butler and Adebayo as their all stars, and then you got your young guys like Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and then you got veterans like Iguodala and Ariza. This team is fully spread out from having stars to young guys to vets, and I love it.
Yeah, it's well, we'll just have to wait and see, and hopefully things develop with Miami, and we can see them, like we said, going up rather than down in terms of their seeding in the Eastern Conference. Let's go over to our next trade that happened today between the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans. JJ Redick, the sharpshooting three-point veteran, has been traded to the Dallas Mavericks. Him and Nicolo Melli are going to Dallas in exchange. The Pelicans will be getting James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and a 2021 second round pick. I'll start it with you, Robert. What are your thoughts on this trade? Is this a pivotal trade for the Mavericks in terms of their playoff hopes this season?
Well, we saw the Mavericks kind of in a slump in the beginning of the year, and we didn't really, Luka and Kristaps. Kristaps has been kind of injured on and off, and Luka's been doing a lot of the work lately. So, Steven, you look like you're moving out of space out there. I'm just saying, it looks like you're exploring out there. But, the Mavericks did explore for a shooting guard, and they got what they needed. JJ Redick's been in the league for so long. Like, I mean, we could look it up and see how many seasons he's been there, but wow, I just hear JJ Redick's name all the time. And when he was with the Pelicans, they didn't make the playoffs. And that was like his first time in his NBA career. He wasn't in the playoffs. But coming to Dallas, Dallas is heating up, and they wanted to get some assets, and they got something from Dallas. He brings his skills, brings what Dallas wants. Sorry, I'm not speaking English. And I think Redick is going to bring that veteran presence. I think maybe try to help out Luka a little bit, help out Kristaps, just help the load a little bit and make some big time threes along the stretch. And, I think he'll be that second, third, maybe beginning fourth quarter type of guy coming off the bench and, helping out Dallas go for a playoff push. I think JJ Redick has a great mentality of going to the playoffs, and he needs to instill that in that Dallas Mavericks team.
Yeah, and I agree. And the only issue that I have is with New Orleans. I mean, you start to wonder, like, they're making this playoff push last year, and this is obviously this is before COVID hit and all, and you just start to wonder with JJ Redick. He was having a pretty solid year last year. Now, as he's getting traded, he's on a bit of a slump right now. Over his last 7 games, you know, he, he's not shooting the ball well at all compared to last year. So that really hurt his trade value, along with the fact that the Pelicans, they've had injury problems, they have shooting problems, not just with Redick, pardon me, not just with JJ Redick, but with the entire team. That definitely dropped his trade value. So with the Mavericks giving up James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and that second round pick, it's not really much to them because James Johnson and Iwundu, these are two guys who, they played a fair amount of minutes last year, but this year they've kind of fallen off the rotation. And then the second round pick, this is looking like to be in the second round, like the 40s and 50s pick, which means the Mavericks wouldn't be really missing out on much with this draft pick. So I think the Mavericks are the big winners out of this trade. The Pelicans, uh, they're. I'm just curious where the Pelicans are going because where's the real identity? The identity for the team is Zion, but there needs to be the key pieces around Zion. And giving away JJ Redick doesn't help. Brandon Ingram, it's just these guys. They do they're all right. They're good players, but they're not good enough to make that push. And also like Lonzo Ball and Nico Alexander Walker. So I'm excited to see what the Mavericks have to offer now with Redick, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith on the wings. It's gonna definitely give our Warriors a run for their money in terms of securing a spot, at least in the play-in tournament for this year's playoffs.
Especially Dallas has been on, somewhat of a good tear right now, and I think they're going to be that team in that 7 through 10 kind of battle, and the Warriors are maybe going to face them in that battle in that 7 through 10 and see if they can make a playoff push or not towards the end. But I think JJ Redick's going to be in a new seed, new culture, new environment. I think this is something he needs. And, with the Pelicans, Steven, you're right. Their identity is Zion, and you can say Brandon Ingram too. I mean, they thought they were going to get rid of Lonzo Ball, and Lonzo ends up staying put in New Orleans because he has been just improving, and this has been his best season by far. So I'm not too sure if Lonzo is going to be that long-term point guard? Does the Pelicans try to get another superstar to help out Zion, Brandon, and Lonzo? I guess that's kind of their three at this point. And Eric Bledsoe, I mean, yeah, we're forgetting about Eric Bledsoe, but he hasn't been
That's
as impressive this year. I mean, we haven't talked about him for a reason because he's not that relevant right now for the Pelicans.
it's. I mean, it's New Orleans is not really a desired trade spot or a free agent spot. I mean, there's Zion, and exactly what you said with Eric Bledsoe kind of being irrelevant this season compared to being such a force with Milwaukee over the last couple seasons. Like, it just kind of puts New Orleans in this gray area of like, okay, we can't rebuild because we have Zion, and if we rebuild around Zion, like, I mean, we've already been doing that essentially since we gave away AD. I mean, there's really no progress, but we can't make an immediate push because we're not a desired location for free agents and for trade prospects. So it's definitely a lose-lose situation in my opinion going down in New Orleans. Let's go on to our next trade. Rajon Rondo is coming back to LA. Less than a year after winning the NBA Finals with the Los Angeles Lakers, Rajon Rondo is going to the LA Clippers. Uh, the Hawks, in exchange for giving away Rondo, will be getting Lou Williams and two future second round picks and some cash considerations in there. Uh, I'll start this off. Um, Interesting trade. Um, because Rajon Rondo got a decent amount of money from Atlanta for a guy who was a great rotational. He fit the perfect you know niche for the Lakers in terms of a point guard who provided an impact for less than 30 minutes in a game. With Rondo, with his age and what he brings to the offensive side of the court, it's not really viable as a starter who would play like 30 to 35 minutes at a game. You know what I mean? So it I think that you're essentially trading away two bench players, essentially six men. For the Clippers, I think that this isn't really much of an upgrade. I think Lou Williams, I mean, he's, previously in recent years, he's been a six man of the year. I think this is a guy that you hold on to as the perfect backup for Paul George at the shooting guard position. But the Clippers, they needed to address the point guard position. I think they could have gone a little bit better with Kyle Lowry, but you have to also go back to the fact that the assets that they have, like draft picks, players to trade away, they're very thin. So I think Rajon Rondo was their best option. It's not a great trade for LA. It's not. It's a good trade for Atlanta though. I mean, you get a solid player, Lou Williams, an actual compliment for what's his name, Trae Young in the backcourt for the Atlanta Hawks. So and also a couple second round picks and some cash. So I think out of this trade, I think the Hawks are the real winners out of this. What are your thoughts, Robert?
I've always liked Rondo. There's always times that I look at Rondo. I think you remember this. He was a Dallas Maverick. They were in the playoffs, and he didn't care. Like he just showed he didn't care being there. Didn't want to be on the court. Turned over the ball. He just fouled like a lot, and didn't want to be out there. Just didn't have the motivation after he got traded from like Boston to Dallas. I I don't know if Rondo was like this with Atlanta because he wasn't getting enough minutes or he just wasn't playing that much. He's playing 27 games so far and only 2 games started. I feel like when we talk about Rondo, he's like the type of guy that you have on a playoff contending team because he shows that he wants to be there and wants to contend for a title. I feel like with Atlanta, that just wasn't it. Yeah, I think he was in more for the money on that one. He wasn't
Oh
really
yeah,
in for the title contention. at all. He was like,
No.
well, I mean, I got my title with Boston and LA. Might as well get the money at this point. Atlanta's going to offer me this much money. Let's do it. And doesn't
It
even play
it
at all.
yeah, it's essentially the impact of your team winning the finals and you being a recognizable name in Rajon Rondo. And I completely agree. I think I mean at this point of his career, he knows that there's no way there's no way like I'm getting this type of money anymore. So I want to let some team bite for the chance for me to get some decent money, and then trade me, trade me to a contender because then that contract is there. And I think for Rondo, I think once that contract ends, I think he's retiring. So he gets that contract locked up that no other team would pay him, and now it's like, okay, let's go for a ring. Now I'm done. So that's my 2 cents on what Rondo might be thinking. Um, but like I said, Atlanta, they have a lot to move forward with. They need to address their defense because their defense is pretty cool. It's like it seems just like a recurring issue for the Hawks. Um, I mean, they give you up 110 and a half points per game. The goal is to get that down to like 107, 108. I know the NBA is all about shootouts and who can shoot the 3-point ball better, but for Atlanta, they just need better perimeter perimeter defense, and that all starts with Trae Young. And I think that Lou Williams, you've said it many times already today, Robert, that veteran presence, maybe that could give him that boost to be more impactful, not just on the offensive side of the court, but also on the defensive side.
Rhino's been having career lows. Like, this is the least amount of minutes he's ever played in his entire NBA career. Like, that's wild. Like, I know he's 34, but I thought at least with Atlanta he would be playing at least a solid amount more minutes and maybe helping out Trae Young out there. But Trae Young does take up a lot of the minutes for Atlanta. So I mean, you're not going to replace Lou Williams, obviously, but yeah, I think they did need a guy that could come off the bench and be that point guard and just feed the ball, and that's what Rondo can do, and then he can drive in and get some easy layups here and there. That's what Rondo's going to be basically. He's going to dish the ball and get easy layups. And hopefully that's Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They better take advantage of it because this is what they need. This is a guy that's not going to shoot the ball as much unless he gets a wide open look because they're double covered.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on to the final trade, the final, I would say, relevant trade that happened today. It was between the Portland Trailblazers and the Toronto Raptors. Norman Powell will be going to Portland. In exchange, Toronto will be getting Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. I'll start with you, Robert. What are your with the addition of Norman Powell? I mean, essentially, the Blazers have been banking on Gary Trent's potential. Um, Essentially, what Gary Trent Jr.'s potential is essentially what Norman Powell already brings to the table. What are your thoughts on that statement I just made?
The one thing I like about Norman is he's like kind of getting in because he's 27 now and he's been in the league for 5 years now. I think they're, I think this was a great trade for the Blazers because they're taking a guy that's kind of bursting out of his bubble. He's averaging like career highs right now. And you could say the same thing for Gary Trent Jr. Don't get me wrong, because with CJ McCollum out, he's been the guy. Well, I think Norman has showed that he has the potential to be that next guy. I know during the playoff run when they were against the Golden State Warriors, he wasn't really a giant piece for that. And then, then after that finals, when Kawhi Leonard left, he took on a way bigger role and became a bigger shooter and I think he got more of his confidence up. And I love that Damian Lillard's gonna, when CJ McCollum does come back, he'll be that guy off the bench. He will be that shooter I think they need. I'm not saying Gary Trent Jr. isn't that guy, but I feel like Norman Powell, I think right now is just having the better season than Gary Trent Jr. is. And also, what is it? They have Kyle Lowry and Fred Van Fleet and Pascal Siakam, who No offense, Toronto's been having a struggling season. Norman Powell has been actually one of the brighter spots this season alone. He's been kind of matching almost Fred VanVleet's numbers, and Fred VanVleet's been the leading scorer this season. Possibly one of the shortest guys in the NBA. Now they have like a 6'3" shooting guard. I like the trade. I give it to the Blazers because I think Norman kind of does bring that, but I think he's just having he's having a better season than Gary Trent Jr. is.
Yeah, I think with what the Raptors are getting, I think Gary Trent Jr. is in. I think he's in good hands. I mean, the Raptors have one of the best coaching staffs in the NBA, with led by Nick Nurse. So I think that, like I said, there he's in good hands as a continued, as they develop him, like they did with Fred VanVleet, like they did with Pascal Siakam. I think he could be another quality player that comes out of the Raptors system. For Rodney Hood, similar to what I've said about Otto Porter Jr. or Gary Harris in the Magic situation, a guy that I don't really see a long-term future with the Toronto Raptors. And for Norman Powell, I mean, for the Blazers, this is pretty much, like I said, it's an upgrade. Like the potential of Gary Trent Jr. is essentially what Norman Powell is right now, in my opinion. I think with um, Norman Powell can shoot the ball, and I think he's a better defender than Gary Trent Jr. With Trent Jr., his issue was on one-on-one perimeter defense. He was getting pushed around quite a bit for his small stature. Powell is in essence, he's a veteran guy. He's been through the ropes, and he is definitely an upgrade on the defensive side of the ball. And I'd see him more in the role if it's Lillard, McCollum, and Norman Powell on the court at the same time. I see him come as like a PJ Tucker in a way, in an offensive sense, where he's going to be in the corner. He's going to be the spot up shooter in the corner for three. So, and the question is similar to what we've been talking about with Evan Fournier as well. Is the fact that that Norman Powell's a free agent at the end of the season. So the question is, with all the money that you're giving to Lillard, to McCollum, are you willing to give a good amount of money to Norman Powell as an unrestricted free agent? And again, these second halves of the season, they're also tryouts as well. The team needs to do well, and then you need to produce at a high level in order for the team to say, hey, like, don't worry about free agency. How about we give you a contract here worth good money? So I think that's Norman Powell's thinking. And he's in good hands with Portland. It's not like they're a team that's a one-hit wonder right now. They've always had the potential to make a big run in the playoffs. It's just injuries have hampered them over the last couple of seasons, whether it's Lillard, whether it's McCollum. And there's a big guy last year that got hurt for Portland that really cost them. Zach Collins. That's another name. So, um,
You
yeah,
know,
that's my two.
Steven, there's something you haven't mentioned today, and I'm really sad that you haven't. It's like, player efficiency rating. I think that's what you call it. And there's something I missed today that I just blew my mind. But I think also Norman Powell has a better player efficiency rating than Gary Trent Jr. does. So let's keep that in mind during that trade process. Maybe he's going to bring a better player efficiency rating to the Portland Trailblazers in itself, and it's above average. It's above 15. Norman's is 17, while Gary Trent Jr.'s is 12. I think like 0.62 or something. So just had to point out the player efficiency rating stat, of the night, because, I thought Steven would, mention something about that, but I guess, I was wrong.
I appreciate that. I mean, again, this is the trade deadline special. I didn't really think much about the PER, so I appreciate that, Robert, for the shout out for my beloved player efficiency rating. And let's move on to the last topic of this trade deadline special on the West Coast Heat Check. It's Kyle Lowry. I mean, I think by far he was the biggest name that was being talked about in terms of trade rumors. And we get to the deadline, and he's still in Toronto. What are your, I mean, what were your thoughts on Kyle Lowry's status as a Toronto Raptor? Do you think that he was going to get traded, or do you think that there could be a move in the books for the offseason for Kyle Lowry?
I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you, because I thought he was maybe going to be a veteran point guard on a contending team. Not this 18-26 Toronto Raptors that does not look solid at all and looks very confusing. To be honest with you, he's not, him and Pascal Siakam, I thought were going to be the future of this team and really get them rolling after Kawhi Leonard left. But I guess they haven't really gotten that identity. It's become more of a Fred VanVleet show over a Kyle Lowry. Now, at this point, if you agree with me, Steven, on that, I just think Fred VanVleet has taken over more of that point guard position over Fred VanVleet. I'm shocked by the move. I thought they would at least, maybe try to get picks for Kyle Lowry and move him to a contending team. But maybe Kyle Lowry wants to stay. Maybe wants to end his career with Toronto because he's been in Toronto since the 2012-2013 season, and he's been one of the long-lasting guys for Toronto. I know Toronto. We look back at a history of the Toronto Raptors. There hasn't been many guys that really don't stay a very long time, and I think you can agree with me on that. I mean, was it Chris Bosh was one of I would say before Kyle Lowry was Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh stayed for a while and then went to a contending team like the Miami Heat and won some finals. So I'm confused why Toronto they were asking way too high of a price. I heard 2 first-round picks and 2 solid players. That's a little much. I mean, maybe a solid player and 2 first-round picks, but Kyle Lowry hasn't proven to be that worth this season. So what are you doing, Toronto?
I mean, I think for Kyle Lowry, I mean, I think the most ideal landing spot if he were to get traded would have been Philadelphia. He went to Villanova, he grew up in the Philly area, so that would have just been, he's getting traded home, and also the fact that Daryl Morey, the GM of basketball operations for the Sixers, has a previous relationship with Kyle Lowry during their time together with the Houston Rockets. So it seemed like that was going to be the trade. That it was going to work somehow, some way. But for Toronto, I don't really blame them for asking a hefty fee for Kyle Lowry. He provides an instant impact for almost any team making a run for the playoffs or making the run for the finals. And think back to, the most recent Raptors players to leave the team. You talk about Marc Gasol. You're talking about there's a bunch of guys that left for nothing. They left for nothing. Didn't Kawhi? He didn't get traded. He was a free agent. He left Toronto for nothing. So essentially, with all these lost players from the title-winning team, from a couple years prior, a couple years in the most recent teams, they kind of need to recoup what they lost from all these guys who left to free agency. So, and if they were to give away Kyle Lowry, it would be kind of like the sign, hey, we might be rebuilding or refocusing our attention on, the future, maybe past this year, past the 2021-22 season, maybe just focus on the 22-23 season. Who knows? But I don't blame where the Raptors are coming from. I don't think the Lakers really had much to offer. Another team was the Miami Heat. Like I said, I think they need to give Tyler Hero to make this a serious conversation for a trade. From what I've been looking at, I don't think he was offered, so I think it was easy for Toronto to say no. So I think for Kyle Lowry, I think he's fine. I mean, they're still in contention for the play-in tournament, so he still has value on the team. Is he playing all that often as he was, a few years back? No, he's not a guaranteed starter like Fred VanVleet has been a stud over the last 2 or 3 years. But he's a Raptors legend, and I think the team understood that in his trade value, and it showed today in why he didn't get traded away to a Philly or an LA or a Miami.
Well, because they have one young guy. They have a Malachi Flynn on there I thought would maybe get more of minutes if Kyle Lowry was going to leave and kind of go with the younger point guard. But no, they're going to keep Kyle. I think Kyle Lowry is going to be that veteran that's going to stay. I mean, he might leave this offseason, but I see him staying in Toronto the rest of his career. I don't see him going anywhere else. He's going to get offered a great contract by Toronto. So I, looking back at it, I think asking for a hefty price wasn't too bad just because, like, yeah, he won a championship with Toronto. And he was one of the main reasons why they won that championship. So.
And that's any final thoughts, Robert, on this NBA trade deadline as we're about to wrap up the trade deadline special, the West Coast Heat Check?
It was an exciting day. I was not expecting one team to sell 3 players in one day, but hey, it happens. I mean, we saw Vucevic, Fournier, and Gordon all leave the Magic in one day. And those are they're like the top 3-4 scorers on the team. They are out of Orlando. Orlando's going to look so different. I mean, heck, tank for the first round pick at this point. You might as well get that first pick in the draft, but don't be worse than the Minnesota Timberwolves because the Golden State Warriors fans really want the Minnesota Timberwolves to keep tanking. So we can, by the way, shout out to Brian Wanamaker. He is traded to Charlotte to add a veteran presence after LaMelo Ball went down. And Marquise Chris Woj, you messed up on that name. Smart. You gotta spell Marquise right. But Warriors made a smart moves today. I know they were small, but gets them out of the luxury tax and opens up some roster spots for the rest of the season. So, Steven, I'm expecting the Warriors to maybe have some 10-day contracts. I was surprised to see the Lakers didn't make a move for a big man, but I just don't like Marc Gasol. I just don't like him in an LA Laker uniform, and he hasn't looked good all year. Dwight Howard or JaVale McGee should have stayed. I mean, that was it, but there should have been a trade for a big man, no doubt, by the Lakers.
JaVale McGee, just a quick note, he is also on the move. Former member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He is now a member of the Denver Nuggets. And I agree with you. I think that with the Lakers, they also were focusing on the 2 big men that were trying to negotiate buyouts with their respective teams. Talk about Andre Drummond of the Cavaliers, and you talk about LaMarcus Aldridge of the San Antonio Spurs. The situation with Aldridge is just you need to get him out of San Antonio. He hasn't played since the beginning of the month. You just need to get him out. Just have him find a new team. And for Drummond, he just wants to play on a contender. I mean, the teams he's played for in his career have just been really, really poor. The Pistons and the Cavaliers. Come on. He could do better. He can definitely, although the big man's being slowly, shown the door in terms of the way that the NBA is played nowadays, like your traditional big man where you can't shoot the ball at the perimeter at all. You're just a guy that does the dirty work down low, gets a good amount of rebounds, puts in the putbacks, et cetera, et cetera. But he still offers that at a high level. Unfortunately, that's going to be a liability come the playoffs, but I think that could be a benefit for the Lakers, especially with the injuries that they've been dealing with LeBron being out. That's another topic we'll be talking about next week for episode 10 of the West Coast Heat Check. Again, if you enjoyed this video, like it, give us the thumbs up. If you want to see more of the West Coast Heat Check, please subscribe. For Robert Deiters, the Deits, I am the big skinny Steve Hughes. Thank you for tuning in to the West Coast Heat Check. We look forward to having you around for next week's episode. Good night.